Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and today on the show we've got a little something different for you. So you've probably heard me mention the Conversations on Media Production series, which is a series of seminars that I've been moderating here in New York City. And I wanted to share one with you. We did one not too long ago on auditioning and casting, which featured two casting directors plus a director and a working actor. The director and the working actor you know because they've been on the show before, but I wanted to kind of introduce you to these people and then show you the panel. So the first member of our panel is John Ort. He's a casting director for shows like Bull and Royal Pains and Ozark. Then we also have Lori Malkin. She is a casting director and the founder of LP Casting. Then Richard Lemay, who's the director, and you've known him if you've seen the show. He's been on the show a couple of times. Director of Bloodbound, Dementia 13. Then we also had Joseph Melendez, and Joseph Melendez you also know from shows like The Americans and Ozark and SWAT, and he was also in Bloodbound, which was directed by Richard. So it's a friendly panel, great time, and some great people, and it's very informative, great show for all of you actors out there, casting directors, or directors who want to work with casting directors. So without further ado, here is the Comp Series audition panel. We're doing 360 degrees of casting. So we're going to start with the casting directors first. The question is about process. How do projects come to you? And like sort of what do you do once you get the ball?
Different ways, but I think so much of the business ends up being about relationships, and so different producers you start to work with, and then they check your availability as things come up. They might recommend you to someone else, to a different producer or director, and then they reach out. Sometimes projects are put up, say on the CSA website, and maybe we put our hat in the ring, for that, and we reach out. Once something is a go, one of the first things that we're going to do is have that creative conversation with the producer and the director in terms of how they see, obviously we've read the script, but then how they see that world, sort of what their vision is for that world and for those characters. We're going to, write up a breakdown. Many of you know what it is, which is character descriptions that we're going to send out to agents and managers and put out into the world. And then based on those conversations of what that vision is, that's where we're going to start. That's where we're going to start making lists, sending those lists to them and discuss, who we're in sync with, if our vision is matching up with theirs.
I think that relationships is definitely the key. I think that when you're first starting out, you're doing a lot of jobs for free, you're bartering a little bit, and you kind of say to them, listen, when you get something bigger, I'd really love to work on that with you. And that tends to happen, so over the years, as you're grinding, which everyone knows, it's a hustle on both sides, right? As an actor and from behind the scenes as well, it's the same situation. You're working project to project. I've been lucky enough where I worked with people who, I gave them a chance back in the day and gave my services for free or, at a very small rate. And then, they come back and they're like, finally have some money, I have something cool to work on, which is really always exciting when you're working with someone that you've worked with, over many, many years and you've kind of seen them grow. I've also been lucky enough to work with some really incredible screenwriters, people who've been friends, who've then kind of brought me in the fold, and I've been able to cast some really cool projects recently from that, which is also really exciting. I always say to actors, there's a lot of content out there, but you can create your own content as well for yourself. When you're at auditions, you need to be connecting with these people. You need to be talking to people. You need to be, it's like you guys are all going through the same thing. Maybe, there's relationships that are happening, there's things that are happening, and you're connecting on different levels, and then you guys can meet up and just kind of creatively connect, and you can create some really cool content that you can star in and produce on your own and then sell it. As far as the process goes, I think it's always really exciting to work with people that you really enjoy working with, and it becomes a really fun process. It's always really hard when you're working with people where it's really political and there's too many cooks in the kitchen. I really love working on independent projects. where I'm able to really get my voice heard or come up with ideas that they would have never thought of. You know, when there's too many people working on a project, there's sometimes too much going on, and you tend to be the hand holder, or you're trying to walk them through the process, which I'm sure you can relate to. So it's really a matter of kind of keeping that relationship professional, but also I think personal, like being friends with the people that you're working with, and then they'll always come back to you because they just enjoy that process.
So then, talk to the director on the panel for Richard. I would say, how do you generally, for the casting process for you, like how do you work with a casting director, or do you work with a casting director? Do you usually get people on your own, or are you seeing people directly? Are they coming to you on tape? What is your process for that?
Well, I do have people that I like to work with, but sometimes, it's trial and error. I've worked with some people. It doesn't always work out the way you want it to, and then sometimes someone brings so much to the table. I think you have to really know what you want, and a good casting director is going to be able to one-up you and bring people in that you didn't see originally when you wrote it or when you read it. And so I've had some really great experiences with amazing casting directors who just think outside the box and make me think outside the box.
And for Joseph, the actor on the panel, how do you get work? How do you is it all agent manager? Do you submit the stuff yourself? Are you calling your agent and say, submit me for that?
At this point, it's my agent and my manager. But again, like Laurie was saying, create your own work. I mean, you always have to keep that in mind. You should never sit around waiting for someone else to give you a job. Make your own. There's just really no other way to go into this business thinking any other way, especially in this day and age with technology the way it is. It's like you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're not doing it.
And did you do that?
Well...
You had to know that was the follow-up, man. Come on.
I'm a little older, so it didn't work like that. No, actually, I'm doing it. I am doing it. It was, I don't believe in multitasking, honestly. I honestly spent the last few years just working on being an actor and really understanding what that means and understanding what the industry is and how I fit in it. And that took a while because it changes constantly. So I took a lot of time to do that. Most of the time I wasn't in a rush. I figured, I never
But you also were working steadily.
Well, yeah, there was, yeah. But I think it's because of that. I tried not to focus on the work, on getting the job. I always tried to focus on the work. I think that's the most important part, whether it's the audition or the project itself.
So getting back to the process thing on the casting director end, so when you're doing a big project, because I know that you've done network shows and you've done streaming series, how much back and forth is there? How much are you holding the hand of the director, and how much is it, because I've heard casting directors say, well, by the time he's settled on what, it can be like giving birth, like it can be like a painful process. But what's that like in terms of, you get the assignment and then you start bringing people in, and then you've got so many people to figure in. How do you manage all that, and what is expected of the actor at that point when you're doing a big project like that?
I think it's very case by case in terms of whether it's a series maybe for a network or whether it's a Netflix series, the size of the role, in terms of how many people you're going to be bringing in for that role, how many choices selects from us that we're going to send along. Let's say it's we're talking about like an episodic co-star sort of role. We might see 35 people and send our favorite 8, something like that. If it's like a much bigger thing, it's a large series regular role, it's a major recurring role, we're probably going to send a lot more. options, and give a lot of different ways to go, and think outside of the box, and say, okay, what's on the page and how you talked about it. Here's a bunch of people that all fall in there, but I'm going to give you a lot of diverse choices. I'm going to give you a lot of different ideas of ways this might be able to go, and start getting feedback. Right. So in that case, you start getting feedback. Sometimes it goes very smoothly. Sometimes it goes very smoothly, and you don't need a lot of back and forth. And then, there are going to be those times where, for whatever reason, it's just not clicking, it's just not working, and we're going to just keep going, and we're going to keep seeing people, and maybe the sides are going to change, maybe the material is going to change, and and it's constantly evolving. From the moment that breakdown is sent out, by the time we get to casting, it can almost not match the breakdown. I mean, again, that's also a specific kind of case, but it's always evolving, it's always changing, and so you have to just kind of go with the flow.
I think what you also have to understand is that sometimes you're not getting your first, second, third choice, potentially. So when people are like, oh, the chemistry was a little off with that cast, what you don't understand is that sometimes you're not getting your first choice. You're not even getting sometimes your fourth or fifth choice because of whatever reason. So sometimes it's not what you expected it to be, and you have to explain that to your clients, like who you're working with, that you're trying to make it all work, right? And usually it's an ensemble, and there is a chemistry part to it, which sometimes can be a little off, especially in auditions, but sometimes it could be so right. You get into a situation where you're like, oh my God, like that's, someone can give you literally the chills, or someone can make you tear up, in an audition, and you're really pleasantly surprised. You weren't expecting it. Also keep in mind, self-tapes are a big part of our business nowadays, which I think is pretty incredible, that we can audition people from all over the country, sometimes all over the world. But just keep in mind, like when you're dealing with your client, you have to set expectations so that they understand that the process is not always going to be as easy as what they think it's going to be, right? And you're also dealing with their agents and their managers, and there's a lot of expectations that come with working with someone's reps too.
I shot a movie years ago, and I had written a part for a muscular, bald man with a beard, and very specific. And the casting director brought that man in, and he had credits, and he was it. And then she brought this guy in. And I always say he showed up to shoot the movie. He didn't show up to get the job. And he blew everyone out of their seats, and everyone just sat there. And when I picked him, she was like, really? And I said, I know, because he was just amazing. And it worked out.
How much of this job in terms of casting, because, anybody who's ever gone into an audition knows that, you do it and you sometimes feel you did well, and sometimes you feel you blew it, and sometimes when you blew it, you get the job, and sometimes when you feel you did great, you don't get the job. How much of it is instinct on your part? How much of it is just your gut reaction to that person? And how much of it is, because I don't know how much is, because you have the greatest resume in the world, like Joseph's got a great resume, but he's not right for every part. I mean, he might disagree with me. I was going to say, he might disagree with me, but like, how much do you feel like that part when you're sitting on that side of the table is just, your gut or your heart telling you what's right?
I think within 5 minutes if you want to work with someone. As soon as someone... Right, probably even less. But immediately if you want to work with someone or not. Then it's about trying to pull something out of them that you're not seeing. So if you can work with them in the room, then that's a callback. One thing to keep in mind is, I used to be an actor many moons ago when I was young, but we want you to be the person. Like when you walk in the room, we want you to be the one. And a lot of people don't realize that, and I think there's so many nerves that it can throw you off, but know that everyone's rooting for that person every time you walk in the room, and That's something that surprised me the first time I was on the other side of the table.
I agree with you. I actually normally, the way that I run a room, like I want it to be warm. I want it to be inviting. You know, we're there for each other. But most actors, that's not their experience. You know, you're walking in with a casting director or, you know, people are on their phones. People are doing other stuff. They don't feel welcomed. They don't feel inspired in any way. And I think that's the majority of actors' experience. I think it's really scary. I think it's really intimidating. So, you know, a lot of times when they come in for me, they're like, thank you so much for making me feel like a human being, for making me feel like a person. Because I think a lot of people don't necessarily allow that, which I always find to be really surprising, because I think it's a shame, because the whole point is to feel good. But also keep in mind, you could have an off day and just be going through whatever you're going through in your personal life or whatever, and you know that you were right for that part, but you didn't do well that day, or whatever the situation. But also, you know, the client may have something in their mind, and you may have killed that audition, and you probably did, but you just weren't what they imagined or what they envisioned. So you can't take it personally also. Please don't take it personally if you didn't get the part for whatever reason.
Now, getting into the sort of nitty-gritty of auditions, I would say Joseph is really, you've become really good at auditioning. You know. Well, you get a lot of work, man, so you must be doing something right. But I would say for you, like, what is your prep when you get that call to come in? What are you doing? Are you making phone calls? Are you saying, who knows that director, and how do I, you know?
IMDb, I mean, if you're an actor, you should have an IMDb Pro account, because it's really useful. Once you get the breakdown, you see who the directors are, you see who the producers are, you look up, one of the first things I do is look up their work. If it's a director that I've never worked with before, or isn't prolific in TV maybe, I'll see if they have any independent films. Watch the stuff they do. It's amazing. I've heard, and I don't know if you guys can say this, but I've heard from casting directors that actors would walk in to audition for a show not knowing the style of the show, the tempo, how it works. You're shooting yourself in the foot with that, because that's your job. Watch at least one episode of whatever you're auditioning for. Know how it's going to work, how it flows, what the tempo. It's musical. It has to be in some way, so pay attention to that, because it's they don't want to teach you. They don't want to take the time of teaching you that on set, and they're not going to, honestly. If you don't get it, you're just not going to get the job. And it's something you have to start being familiar with. One particular story I will say, when I was cast with The Sinner, the first episode I did was with a director who'd only done one independent film. So I watched the film. He had a really specific style of what he liked. He liked a lot of stillness. So when I went into the room and I auditioned, I literally did nothing. Just stood, kept very still and said the lines. And that's what booked me the job. But it was because I watched. If not, I could have played. It was a scene that I could have played a lot bigger that would have blown me the job. But knowing how he likes to work and what his eye is like is really important.
For you guys, when you guys work with agents and managers, what's the difference between an agent and a manager? For like what and why doesn't an actor need both?
There's so many agents and there's so many managers now. I think the lines blur more than they ever have in terms of what they do. For me, in the way I think of it, is the agent is there to work for you to find work and make you money. Like find you the audition so that you'll make money, so that they'll make money, and to work on the deals. And the manager, to me, is more about the long-term career. You know, is there to like really think long-term with you, and so, you know, where your big agent maybe is not going to pay any attention to that short film that I called about, your manager might be like, no, do this because that's a great casting director, or no, that like that you know, that producer, they're up and coming for, you know, they had a big film festival thing, whereas maybe the big agency is like, I don't have time for that. I mean, look, that's really sort of just like a, you know, my basic sort of thought of that's the difference. in terms of having both, I mean, look, I think it's just a personal thing. If you're being repped with someone, and maybe there's a manager that you just know for sure can get you indoors that agent that can't, and that as a team together, and that's also important. The agent and manager, they're a team. So you also, if you have one already, you want to make sure that they're in the conversation when you're going with someone else, because it's supposed to be a team. And if having both is going to make that team stronger, then okay. But if they're on sort of a similar level, then maybe you don't need both.
To me, the difference between an agent and a manager, to me, an agent would have like a ton of clients, right? You would imagine like, William Morris and CAA and, all those big agencies, they have tons of clients, thousands of clients. A manager should really only have a handful of clients so that they can really focus on that person's career long term, right? I mean, that's what you would hope. There's obviously managers who disguise themselves as agents and they have lots of clients. But I think the difference should be your agent is someone who obviously can get you in the door and all of that stuff, but your manager is someone who really cares about you. Like you're talking to them about your personal life and they know everything about you and they know what's good for you. They know that you should be doing that independent film because it's incredible work for your career. Whereas the agent really doesn't care. They're looking at the bottom line. So yes, they work in tandem. Sometimes they don't always agree, and that could be an issue for you. So it's really up to you. You're also giving away a huge percentage of what your take home would be. You're giving a huge percentage to your agent, a huge percentage to your manager. So it's really up to you if that's something that you feel like you need. I think when you get to a certain level, it's helpful, sure, but you don't have to have it. Like, I don't think it's a must-have. So I think it's really just a choice. And maybe it's just giving yourself a little bit more opportunity. And also, I think your manager would probably be a little bit more creative for some of the parts that are coming for you. Like, if I'm casting a scripted podcast, like maybe a big agent wouldn't work on it. But luckily enough, the script was getting enough buzz, so people were like fired up about it, which is really great. So you'd want that person to really have your back.
The other thing I would talk about is, and I've been going to the podcast, No Rest for the Weekend has been covering a ton of festivals. Diversity seems to be a theme. And I'm wondering, is that a mandate for you? And as a writer, are you doing that in terms of trying to put more diverse voices into the script to begin with so that it's there from the start?
I do, but I tend to write what I know, and I'm surrounded by a lot of diversity. So my films have always had at least some level of diversity. So I think that's important for me, and I try to kind of insert that in everything I do. It's the world we live in, and it's especially right now. It's a real kind of cool moment where we're seeing diversity really kind of soaring and surprising a lot of people. And I think it behooves everyone in the industry to kind of jump on that bandwagon.
Joseph, for someone like you, I mean, I know that you often get the Latino guy. So, have you ever, they said, we want somebody, and you said, I'm right for it anyway, or you've had to kind of fight for a part?
I've been lucky. I've been seen for a lot of different types of roles. I haven't always just been the Latin guy, thankfully. I mean, I book those more often. I've been really lucky my entire career. I've got to say, even when I started, I've been lucky to have that ethnic ambiguity that nobody really knows what I am, and if
I've seen words like vaguely ethnic on casting sheets. Yeah. Do they still use that, or is that outlawed now? Ethnically ambiguous.
I did once hear P&G Latin.
And for you guys, are you seeing that on breakdowns now? And is it specific where they want somebody, they say Black, Latino, Asian, or is it, all ages, all ethnicities kind of thing?
I would say now more than ever, we're opening up to all ethnicities. I think that people want to see everybody represented in their auditions. And also, I think it's really nice for us to kind of push our clients towards that, because I think even not necessarily just the color of your skin, but trans actors, gay actors, actually, you're casting gay actors for gay parts. I just think there's definitely a push towards that. I think there's also been an interesting thing about the wording on the breakdowns, which I'm sure you can also relate to. You have to be very careful about how you word things. Not to say that we weren't before, but you really have to be careful about how you're wording everything so that there's no offense taken. Even when it comes to an accent or having to speak a language or things like that. But yes, I'm all about pushing ethnicity. Luckily, I've been able to work with clients who are really open to that and want that.
Luckily the stuff I've been working on, the writers, the producers, everyone's been very open to it. So it hasn't had to be any kind of sort of fight, but even, some indie things that, one thing that for me is, I like that we're getting to a place where I don't have to actually have the conversation. I don't have to say, are you open to this? I just present it.
My one last question is, everybody talks about this, and I don't know how really to define it. Everybody talks about the it factor. Like, oh, that person has it, or we want somebody with it. Does anybody know what the hell it is, or how to define it?
I would say what I would define as the it factor. I've had auditions where, we've seen a lot of people for a certain role, and then someone comes in and they are that part. And then every other audition after that, they come in and they are that part. For me, it's about authenticity and feeling like that person is the role. Like you see it in them, right? It's like they connect to it, but it's not a character. It's them. It's a version of themselves to some degree, and that's why it feels believable. Like you walk in, they're like, oh my God, like that is the person. After you've seen 50 actors act the part, and then someone comes in and is that part. To me, that is the it factor. It's someone where they're not acting, they are the role.
That's all we have time for today. Thanks for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more episodes, you can always find them on our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. You can also subscribe to us on all the major podcast channels. Once again, I'd like to thank my guests, John Ort, Lori Malkin, Richard Lemay, and Joseph Melendez. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.